If you were alive during the 2000s, you may remember just how prevalent zombies were in the media. It seemed like there was a new movie or show centered around the undead every day of the week, and every school in the world had that one kid who was obsessed with them. It was a simpler time. Though that era has come and gone, zombies still maintain quite a cult following. Personally, I'm reminded of this every time I see a video game starring the little flesh feasters. Based on recent memory alone, we've had Dying Light 2, Dead Island 2, the Resident Evil remakes, and many, many more. That's a lot of zimzams. That's also a lot of zimzams in premium-priced packages. What about the more cost-friendly indie offerings? What about games like Raging Bytes? This 2023 entry into the ever-growing library of scramble-brained spooky guys sees us taking on the role of Ben. Ben's a cop who awakens in a hospital one night to find the world in a state of decay. Naturally, Ben decides to get the hell out of hell and search for other survivors. What ensues is a roughly 6-hour journey across a parody of the eastern United States. Sadly, those 6 hours will carry you through some serious peaks and valleys. This is highlighted the most by Raging Bytes' main narrative. The game starts off strong, with a unique premise that genuinely caught my attention, but that strength begins to falter the longer Raging Bytes go on. Ultimately, I found myself detached from the narrative. The gameplay doesn't fare much better either. While I do feel there are some solid mechanics here, it didn't do enough to keep my attention the entire game. Choosing a turn-based combat system for a zombie survival game seemed like an odd choice, and initially helped pique my interest in the title. Sadly, this format of combat really slows down Raging Bytes' pace. It also doesn't help that enemies are serious bullet sponges, specifically bosses. They all felt like they took an insane amount of damage before falling. Imagining those fights on any difficulty besides the default one is genuinely scary. There's also such little variety in regards to gameplay. Practically the entire adventure boils down to reading dialogue, exploring your surroundings for gear and lore, battling some undead while moving from point A to B, and repeat. Granted, there's a couple side quests for you to do, though they too ultimately boil down to the same process of rinse and repeat. On a much brighter note, Raging Bytes does a much better job with its presentation. I'm not generally one to be wowed by what I'm assuming is a game made in RPG Maker. I've played a fair share of them over the years, and they almost all look or play the same. Raging Bytes is a surprising exception. Though a few environments do repeat, most of the locations you visit feel varied and at least somewhat inspired. Excellent use of lighting makes for gorgeous, atmospheric environments, and solid pixel art helps to bring both the main cast and the walking Zombilinis to life with plenty of detail. The game's soundtrack also helps to set the tone in a few ways. Crunchy and retro, Raging Bytes' soundtrack does a great job emulating the gritty feel of both the setting and the aesthetic itself. Rockin', boppin', sloppin' MIDI guitars eat away at your ears as prickly, pruny percussion follows close behind to clean up the crumbs. It's a bit on the small side in regards to actual tracks and track variety, but overall I think Raging Bytes has a solid soundtrack. So what are my thoughts on Raging Bytes? I think the game has a unique charm that can't be denied. The environmental designs, retro-inspired soundtrack, and wide cast of characters all stand out as highlights here. Unfortunately, many of these aspects are overshadowed by poor pacing, shallow combat, and a confusing story. Would I recommend Raging Bytes? That really depends on what you're looking for in a game. If you want a flashy and fast-paced indie to sink your teeth into, this won't do much to satiate your appetite. But if you're in the market for the equivalent of a B-movie in video game form, Raging Bytes may be worth checking out.